I'll now hand over to Professor Chris Pettit.
Thanks, Rupert, for that kind introduction. The main reason we're here is to hear from Fatemeh and the excellent research that she's been looking at for a number of years, looking at schools and contested spaces, looking at parks and open spaces. And Fatemeh is one of our research fellows, one of our star research fellows here at City Futures Research Centre, but also she's an associate lecturer in our School of Built Environment, where she is teaching in our landscape architecture program. So, Fatemeh, you're reporting on this excellent project that's received funding, seed funding through our faculty and in collaboration with colleagues across the university. And I'll hand over to you to do the presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Grace, and thanks everyone for attending this session. This project, as Chris said, it's funded by our design and architecture faculty, and it's been supported by Professor Chris Pettit, our director, Lila Mularki, OAM from Gonski Institute for Education, and Associate Professor Xiao Feng from School of Public Health. Today we're going to talk about schools' use of public community spaces in their local neighborhood and the opportunities and challenges that it presents for students, schools, their local councils, and some state government, associated state governments, and some implications, what we can learn from this.
No, just hang on. They can't see the slides, so just
okay.
trying to figure out why that's.
That looks like it should be working. Yeah.
Is it working?
Can you see the slides online? Is there anything in the chat?
Yes.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you.
Helpful.
Great, thank you. So that's the project about, but why is it not working?
Maybe just signal to me when you're.
Yeah, sure. Why are we looking at this, and why schools are using neighborhoods facilities? One of the main reasons is that the number of students at some Sydney schools is surging beyond triple capacity, and as you can see from the map there, some of the schools are about 200–300% capacity, and even those schools with those green dots are more than 100% capacity, and we have more than 600 students, 600 schools drowning in the boundary buildings. It means that these schools need to respond to the increasing population by putting more buildings within the school sites. But it means that they will struggle with less open space within their own sites. So what's the problem if we don't have enough space within the school? One of the problems is the conflict that they face within the school grounds, and research shows that an average of one conflict within the recess time happens every 3 minutes. We can do something about it with our school design, but it wouldn't work if the schools are at 200–300 capacity, 100% capacity. So can you please next slide? So why is this important for us and for the students? The first thing is the physical activity. Research shows that at least 60% of children engage in physical activity when they are given the opportunity to be outdoors. And a local study shows that only 19% of Australian children actually and adolescents reach that 1 hour recommended level of physical activity. And worse than that, around 23% of primary school students are recognized as obese. It's also important for the cognitive performance because research shows that by spending time outdoors, the students' on-task behavior improves by 10 to 15%, and fidgeting actually increases just before recess. And when it decreases after recess, especially if they get engaged in some physical activity. The other benefit is the social skills. Especially in primary schools, physical activity at recess is directly associated with peer relationship at the school, positively associated with relatedness to school amongst both girls and boys, and it has a positive association with school climate amongst girls. And it's really important because girls are those who suffer more from school overcrowdedness, and this is what we hear from them. You can just click next. There is a recording there.
On the icon?
No, it should work when you change the.
Oh,
Yeah, the first one. There are two, so yeah. Okay, the sound is not working. Okay, can I just
yeah.
Yeah, whenever we chase people, there's always 5 people I always bump into, and I'm like, oh, sorry.
Yeah,
and I can see the and I just start slowing down. So I haven't, but without them, it's a very clear distance. I can run like Sonic.
Yeah, you walk 3 steps, bang into someone. Walk 1 millimeter, bang into someone.
Yeah.
Walk 3 steps.
Keep the guy tiny.
Yeah, I know, and then they fall over and they're like, and then you feel bad.
Yeah.
You wouldn't go run around much because there's so much going on. You almost forced to sit down.
Yeah,
and sometimes too much people.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll probably get injured or fall over.
So it means that definitely overcrowding is not really helping, and it's a strong constraint to their physical activity. Next slide, please. And it's not just about physical activity, it's also about other types of free play activities. And one of the primary school principals who participated in our workshop said they need a space and they need to get out and run, and there is nothing like green space. And if we look at the Council's strategic priority to see if the open space is really available outside or not, we can see that it's not just schools that need that open space, but also the population of some of those councils. It's growing, and for example, this is from City of Sydney strategic priority. It's Sydney 2030 actually. Document. It was published in 2016, and it says that from 2021 to 2036, the population will increase by 25%. And it means that there will be open space from 18 square meter per person will decrease to only 14 square meter per person. And it was actually 25 15 years ago. So it's not just the schools, but also local residents need that open space too. And this is from the same document. It shows that even in the current situation, open space is being provided not just by the council, but also by other agencies. And they're actually relying on the open space being provided by other agencies. And they indicated the partnership with other sports field providers could be one of the solutions to respond to population demand. And as one of the council representatives participated in our workshop said, it's going to be hard for them where they get that money from if that's not identified as a priority. And because it's already as a priority in the council's strategic plan, it means that they're looking at it, but the problem is still there. So what did we do? We engaged 3 councils in 3 the schools within those local government areas in 3 focus groups. And so each focus group had a council, like one or two schools within the same local government area, and some state government representatives. And we also invited some industry experts like landscape architects and urban designers to participate in those focus groups. And we ran these focus groups in teams, and and it was actually facilitated by a board that was established in Miro, and they contributed to that Miro board by filling those tables that you can see on the screen. So there are 4 columns on each of these tables asking for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So it's basically a SWOT analysis of the topic. I also am running focus groups with the students within 2 schools that participated in that focus groups, and it's still on the way. But I completed 3 focus groups with the students, and those audios that you're listening to are from those interviews that I've had with those students. So what students think about that? They really like this space, which is open, the grass, which is not fake, and they can run around. There's more space, as they said, to play, for boys to play and for girls to sit and talk peacefully. And they like the idea of getting away from the school, going somewhere different instead of spending the whole 6 or 7 hours at school. Okay, there's another audio.
I like it because it's really big and open, and there's not a lot of things that's blocking our way, so then we can do like run around freely without having to worry about any equipment. And I also like it's a different environment from our school playground.
I like how it's like quiet and flat, and it's like real grass, and there's like little flowers and like nature and stuff. I like how it's not crowded, and like we can get some fresh air, and like we can have this time to just hang out with our friends instead of like being in other years. Yeah, being with other years, and it's like very crowded in the in our playground at our school.
Okay, and is that can you go next? Okay, so the opportunities and actually strengths, the strength for those schools, these schools actually didn't participate, but for the schools are being really close to that local open space, and as they said, it's a nice luxury to have, and they were quite lucky. They said they were lucky to have this space close to them, to the schools, and it was a really important, and as they said, to have open space close to them. And if it wasn't close enough, it meant that they had to hire buses, and they could be very expensive, and they probably didn't have enough space outside their school where they can pick up, the bus could pick up the kids, and the feasibility became very difficult in these circumstances. And one of these other school principals said, it takes us so long, it's almost not worth the efforts. And when there is a short walk from the school to the open space, there are also other threats, like the volume of traffic. They had to cross multiple roads, and one of them said there is a whole level of complexity even trying to take the class down the road across 3 busy roads and soon to be a light rail. And one of the landscape architects who participated said, when you're planning new schools in new suburbs, we need to think about these corridors in advance, because there is a lot of connectivity that is missing in the established schools and park spaces. Our current infrastructure doesn't work in that direction. So there is another audio sharing students' perspective on that.
The transport I like because it's local, and like Coco said, it's not like 5 gazillion hours, and it's like we could even walk here if we wanted to, but I think it's more enjoyable on the bus because you can hear each other better without the like sound of cars going by and bikes and like yeah, because we're not like tripping over everybody's feet. Yeah, like when you walk. It was hard for the teachers, I think, because like there were so many kids, and like if one kid was like not making the lines like straight, then like it could be harder for the teacher. There's also like whenever people tend to go like on the roadside and really close to the road, and then teachers are really stressed about it. So then like we have to stop and go and stop and go.
So they liked the walk because there was an opportunity for the students to talk and actually to explore the neighborhood, but they could sense that the teachers felt quite, they were stressed about it. There is an opportunity for actually, yeah, sorry, can you go next? Next. Yeah. Okay. So there is an opportunity to use that as an experience, as a learning experience, to go from the school to the park in the neighborhood. If they look at it as a teachable moment, as the same landscape architect actually brought this up, we can treat the journey to the playground as a learning experience. The journey is as important as the destination. Every moment outside is a teachable moment. When it's curriculum, then it's not seen as a waste of time getting from A to B. As I said, students actually see this as an adventure when everything else is fine and it's not a really long walk.
Foot takes longer, but it's sort of like an adventure. What did you find adventurous about? Just like, because you're with your class walking around in like an area you probably haven't been in, because like you get to walk around with your class and you don't get to be with your class like out of school. Yeah. So it's kind of like fun, like walking around the streets and stuff.
Rupa, can you go? If you look at this from the point of view of the councils, they see the use of this space controversial because these open spaces are seen as contested spaces. There is conflict of activities, because as they said, there are varying people competing that can often conflict in terms of their particular users. As one of the council representatives said, a good example is dogs using public spaces. So obviously open spaces just has to be delivered for all students and all residents, but not necessarily always co-use, because the fields take so much activity. And actually, when I was on the field with the students, there were some people with the dogs, and the teacher said that they are quite concerned about the food that students actually leave behind being taken by the dogs and probably get them sick. So it's local residents have this kind of mixed feeling about that. So this is probably, you know, the next generation using open spaces, but they want to use the space at the same time, but there's a conflict of interest. And also, these spaces are in very high demand from other schools as well, from clubs. In the case of sporting fields, they are in very high demand from both schools and clubs. Schools want to use the fields all year long, not like the clubs that are seasonal, and that causes them quite a bit of angst because of the constant demand on them. One of the council representatives said that. And another council said that actually the land is unbelievably difficult to procure. You know, we suggest ourselves trying to get a new park, like good luck. It means that they don't really, they can't really get more open space, and yeah, there is a lot of people who wanted to use it in different ways. And if they can get, you know, if the school is quite close to the open space, and there is a kind of agreement between the council and the school to use, there is still some other concerns, like the lack of essential amenities. And one of them is toilet blocks, because of the length of the time that students use the space. So that particular park has a playground, but it doesn't have the toilet. There might be open space close by, but it's not necessarily suitable for use. So it's also about the amenities that park should include for that type of use. And the other council representative said, if the open space is designed to be used by the school, the standard is slightly higher, and that will put a pressure on council to consider more about the safety, and that definitely will impact our budget. When we're doing the design and building facilities, you will be required to put in more amenity blocks, more balustrading. So if these spaces are not really designed with the students in mind, to be used by the students, and with that intensity. And this is how students think about the amenities within those parks.
The bin is all over there, but we're not allowed there because it's out of zone.
Out of bounds.
It's out of bounds because it's too close to the road. It's like in the park, but we're not allowed to go there.
Really restricted.
Mainly the whole park except for over there,
down there, in the trees.
So anywhere that's close to the fence.
We can't cross these trees or that gate, if it just kept on going.
Yeah.
We can't go behind the fluffy bushes.
Yeah. Park.
No, until it's like a pea.
Yes.
That one.
And that park gate, if you measure it.
Yeah.
Is there any other beans that you can use except for that one?
No. Oh, except for our lunch boxes. And also, if you really need to go to the bathroom, you can't go over there. And the teachers need to look
You've got to
around
go and then go to the bus and go there. You can't you can't stay here. Oh, I gotta go to the bathroom. They're nope, too late. Yeah.
You need to wait till school, otherwise. I guess it's a safety thing though, because then there's one less teacher to watch the kids.
Yeah.
Someone goes behind the bush and goes across the road.
So it means that even if there is amenities within that space, it's not necessarily being used by the students because of the safety issues. And there are some out-of-bounds areas within that space because the teachers can't really supervise the whole space together. And do schools reciprocate? You know, if they actually use open spaces within their local councils, do the local councils have access to the spaces within the schools? And one of the council representatives said, I think this is quite an issue for the community because it's perceived as unfair. We have lots of schools in our local government area that have fantastic open space facilities, but we don't necessarily have the ability to access. Next one. So we have this joint use project that has been drafted in master planning guideline for schools by school infrastructure, it's kind of recommended sharing of school-owned open spaces in return for upgrades to the school assets or using the council-owned spaces during the school time. And when it happens correctly, one of the state government representatives said it's very hands-off for both of us. We use the school courts there and they use our park and playground, and that's a very good arrangement. That's a long arrangement. It's been running for 20 years. If you want to do this to work well, there has to be consideration of how policies affect the ability to have relationships with community, council, and schools. It means that it's happening in some schools, but not necessarily in all of the schools that using council's own open spaces. And there are multiple issues associated with the schools when there is not access to the school, not proper access to the school. And one of them is the design of the school itself, school master planning. I just read this aloud. We have a section that we would be happy to cut off from the school sharing the sports court. But if you open the school, there is no way to stop people going up the multiple levels. If there was a better line of demarcation, and then we could actually secure the outside from the rest of the building, it would have made it much easier side to share with people. It means that the school wasn't really designed in a way that could share its facilities with the public. But that school was actually using council's facilities. And as one of the councils said, they are really locked up. State government said that there might be some opportunities when there is upgrade to the existing schools. And this plan is actually from the same document, school master planning by school infrastructure, and it said it's very simple that the access for out of school hour use can be from outside, and it's separated from the main access, and it's only to hall and covered outdoor learning area, but not necessarily to the open space, because the open space is actually connected to the classes and the whole school altogether. And the other problem is actually schools are reservoirs, and as one of the council representatives said, school property is a no-go zone. Even with the schools, I think they feel that way as well. It's very hard to access schools, especially after COVID. It's even harder to access with a question about something that is an immediate concern, and I'm not sure how long that scenario is going to last. And one of the other council representatives said that we've been talking about using the school grounds for at least 20 years, and it's slightly improved, and then the schools start to look like prisons, basically. So it means that our schools are not necessarily designed in a way that they can share their facilities with public. But if we look at some examples from overseas, we can see that how relaxed they are about sharing the facilities, open spaces with the schools, with the community. This is one of the good examples in Denmark. So they removed parking spaces from that street to create a shared street, and they removed the curbs, school fences altogether. And actually the street is the school ground, works like as a school ground, and the community can also use that space at the same time. Next one. And this is another side. This is the same space, the other side. And as you can see, students are using the street, and they change the paving material. They install play structures and some street furniture. And if you can see on the slide, there's a slide coming from the building to basically street from the probably classroom or the corridor down to the street. So it's all play zone for the students, and it's safe because there is no car on the street. Okay, and if schools are going to share their facilities, their space, there are some weaknesses in terms of the cost, operational cost that comes with this joint use. It's the cost of maintenance and the cost of booking. So schools, they don't necessarily have the capacity to contribute to the maintenance and upkeeping of the space, and they take bookings, but it's quite limited. So I'm just reading this aloud. They're really narrowing down the bookings. So it's not like somebody rings up and I'd like to book such and such room for next week or next 3 weeks. They're really looking for season or term bookings, which they can obviously manage because they haven't got the additional resources to run a booking system. That's a fairly simple need for the community that want to use facilities. It means that the community can't really use school spaces the way that they can use council spaces. But there are some opportunities which are actually council's capacity and strength. So councils obviously has enormous expertise, and the whole range will be the operational aspect of looking after open space, as one of the council representatives said. Councils are basically booking agents for facilities. They said we're really good at it. So it means that they can do this for the schools, but there is more pressure on the council to be able to maintain those aspects to high standard because they come with high operational costs, both in terms of staff resourcing and budget. It means that it has costs, eventually for the councils. So it's probably the Department of Education that should contribute to this, to make sure that the person who is, the agency who is doing this quite good can do the job very well. Council has the booking system, but that obviously takes resources of council to manage booking. And what are the implications? So one of the implications is political advocacy that can come from councils, making sure that this is one of the areas championed by their elected members. It can go higher up in the food chain, and they build this narrative around why it is important for these spaces to be accessed by schools. The other implication is creating or drafting a clear, agreed guideline. There was a lot of discussion about this. There is just so many different parties, they said. It's really hard when you don't have those absolute guidelines, when not everyone is on the same page. that can always be a huge threat to getting the right model to work. So they basically need a guideline. And there is some formal arrangements around the use of sports court, but no formal arrangement around the informal use of these spaces, like the way that schools use these spaces for, during recess or lunchtime periods. And one of the state government representatives said that there is a template for joint use agreement in the Department of Education for allowing community access to a school ground as part of Share Our Space program, but the idea of a template to facilitate that sharing can go both ways. So there is one template, one kind of like a guideline for the use of school facilities, but not necessarily a guideline for the use of council's facilities. Another implication is consultation with the schools before designing the schools, before this happened actually, so we can know how to locate the schools within the neighborhood and how schools can share their facilities with their community at the master planning stage. A lot of the shortcomings that we identified at the beginning went down on the consultation documents, but were never acted on, because in the eyes of authorities, so many of these problems were operational, not design. And I think the consultation is typically being a fairly token effort and ignored, and then sort of popped off into us. So it means that the school principals and those people on the ground, educators, they were not really consulted, and some of those problems could be fixed from the beginning and adapted. So one of the council representatives said that probably has to be some policy and support provided to principals who are responsible for managing those, to make sure it happens easily and is not a burdensome and doesn't come a nice have and drops off if it's too difficult. And we actually came across that a lot within the focus groups. We also need to, it means that they also need to consult with the councils, probably the department, but there is a constant struggle, even from state government, to have the approval, as they said. We require to then actually be able to engage with councils really early in the process. We could definitely improve, and they're actually trying to improve their work. Okay, next one. So where to from here? There are some opportunities which we can achieve, and they greatly match the organization's strength. For the local government, the opportunity is to upgrade facilities to accommodate diversity of users, because actually it has been already acknowledged within the strategic plans of so many of those councils. For the state government, the opportunity is to draw on the council's operational expertise and resources, like staff who could book those spaces, maintenance, to increase the intensity of their space use, and for the school to program their curriculum to benefit from the use of open space and don't see the journey as a waste of time. How we can use the strength to reduce the organization's vulnerability to threats. For the local governments, the strength is the availability of diverse spaces, so they can manage contested space. They need to see just which space suits what use. And for the state government, the strength is their ability to advocate for open space and recreational facilities, because their voice is quite stronger than us. and to overcome the shortage of available land, which is the threat that could be reduced by this strength. And how we can overcome weaknesses to attain opportunities. For the state and local governments, they can create clear procedure and guidelines for future use, including school operate for joint use of schools. And for the state government to offer some funding to the councils to be able to draw on their resources and to help schools. And how we can prevent weaknesses to avoid making the organizations more susceptible to threats. For the state and local governments, they can update population forecasts thoroughly and regularly to avoid failing response to population demand. And for the state government, they need to consult with the schools from the beginning at the design and master planning stages to facilitate, to make sure that they can do this joint use and to facilitate use and to avoid challenges associated with public access to school facilities. This one. And another one. Yeah, okay. So there is some time for question and answers, but I set up a link for a survey. You know, if you have any comments and you can't really share with us today, you can just use that QR code to comment on this presentation and the findings. But this is another quote from one of the participants. These sorts of forums are very useful because of the networking and sharing, realizing that our problem might not be just our problem, but is a shared problem. So I really appreciate the participants contributing to this research project. Thank you very much. Yes, question?
Fatemeh, excellent presentation. Like it's such a challenging issue. I mean, if you just look at schools just locally around here, you know, there's schools that the open space is completely fenced. No one gets access to on the weekends. There's new schools being retrofitted where no consideration is given to, you know, being able to partition off the open space from the buildings. But I'm wondering from a governance perspective, because you've had these really interesting interviews with the kids, with state government, I guess, Department of Education, and with councils, and it seems like the governance structures are not there. I mean, there's a guideline and there's books and recommendations of policies, but can you comment on other actual mechanisms like where those conversations can actually happen to gain traction? Because, you know, whether that's at a P&C meeting, is there an actual meeting forum that the councils engage with the schools? You know, where's that actual sort of intersection point from a governance perspective?
There are some meetings going on with councils and the state government and Department of Education, I mean. Some of those councils have these meetings regularly. Probably participants can comment on that. But there are around 2,000 schools in New South Wales, and probably new schools. I'm not really sure about the numbers. Over 2,000 public schools across New South Wales, and they need to work with the councils for each of these individual schools because their needs are probably different from each other. So,
but it sounds like there's no formal governance mechanism or committee structure. It's more left up to individual councils with those schools to do it.
Yes, exactly.
More on an ad hoc basis, and that seems maybe there's a couple of success stories that you said. There's a school and a council that have been sharing that's been in place for 20 years, which is great, but I'm presumably there's 2,000 potentially more success stories that could be there.
Yes,
So
exactly.
yeah, I mean, maybe someone else knows, but you know, having that formal governance mechanism that's, formally built into that dialogue between the schools and the councils seems to be missing.
Yeah, there were some very great success stories. The local council actually gave the school the land to build the school on, and they built some facilities within the school that could be used by public, and the school could also use the open space just close to the school. But there were few examples. It's not the story for every single school. Yeah.
Thanks.
There's quite a lot of chatter in the comments. Sonia Ditlevsens has mentioned, thanks, great work. Also wondering if in your research, how much liability came up and whether it was much of an issue, how schools and councils are protected when there are accidents in each other's open space.
Yes, they have an agreement. They sign an agreement about, and its liability is actually included within that agreement. But from this conversation that we had with the schools and councils, this is not just the issue. There are some formal procedure to use the open spaces, council's open spaces, and liability is one of them. But maintenance, booking, these are some other operational challenges still there.
We have another comment or question by Kay, I think. There is an issue with big property investors having too much power over what happens with land. This really contributes to the overpopulation issues and not having the infrastructure to support high population density. Local councils are powerless to these investors who go straight to the Land and Environment Court.
I agree. Yeah.
Another comment, Mark Egan. At City of Parramatta, we have a formal MOU with Schools Infrastructure New South Wales to address these shared asset opportunities, including design of new and upgraded schools and opportunities to design in shared use opportunities.
Oh, good. There should be, also we talked about post-occupancy evaluation. It's not just about schools that are being built in the future, but also schools that exist and already using council's facilities. So we need to assess them, evaluate those spaces as well to see how they perform.
Eve Clark from Northern Sydney LHD also commented and agreed with Mark and mentioned, I would love to see what that looks like. Peter Johns has asked a question. Did you look at private schools and what was the response?
Yes, actually 12 of the school participants were private schools, and the response was a bit different because state government is quite close to the public schools and supportive of public schools, but not necessarily private schools. And there is another level of challenges with the private schools to have access to outdoor facilities. But they do the booking, they use council spaces, but they take up the cost, themselves.
Perhaps an area for future research.
Yes, there's lots of areas here.
Another comment in the chat, Damien Ham. Northern Beaches Council has entered into an MOU with the Department of Education with the intent to actively seek opportunities for shared use of school facilities outside of school hours, any New South Wales government school on Northern Beaches. So far, we have negotiated access to sports fields at 2 schools. This is working well. It takes time and dollars, though, to work through agreements.
Yes, great.
And Craig.
Hello, Damien. No, I talked to Damien.
Craig, he's mentioned there is the issue that the provision and use of open space within the schools for general public during school hours. School hours are extending from 8 a.m. till 4 p.m. plus. Given such a large time frame out of play, it would be difficult to co-share facilities. I agree with Damien.
Yeah, there's a good conversation going on.
Yeah. And then Mark Egan, again, I'd suggest that outside of organised sport, it's the weekend school holiday access to school open space that needs to be rusted in.
I think that's already there. Yeah, the school, the Share Our Space program facilitates the use of school facilities on weekends, sometimes on weekends and sometimes during the school holidays. But it's not all, the access is actually should be limited. They want the access to be limited to some areas, and for some schools, because of the master planning design, it's not possible this way. So there is a limited number of schools who can share their space with public.
But I guess if there was an agreement to fund an extra gate or fence, I mean, the benefits of unlocking huge amounts of open space for a fairly minimal cost. I keep thinking Randwick Boys, Randwick Girls School, every time you drive past there, you've got these two massive playing fields and you never see anyone on them.
Yes.
And in weekend sport, everyone's, trying to get access to grounds, and here you've got these two perfectly amazing fields that no one uses ever on the weekend. They're completely locked. There's no one on them. Anyway.
Okay, that was all the comments. Okay, great.
That's all the comments.
Well, thank you everyone for coming to this session.
Well, thanks, Fatemeh.